class, this is Professor Smith. I'll be doing a movie on inverse function. And so we have the one-to-one function g and h are defined as follows. G is given by the set of ordered pairs, negative 3, 3, 1, 2, 2, 7, 3, negative 3, and 7, 0. And h of x is defined by the equation 8x plus 13. Is defined by the expression 8x plus 13. Find the following. G inverse of negative 3, H inverse of x, and then H composed with H inverse evaluated at 5. So let's start with the first question, G inverse of negative 3. Our function G is expressed as a set of ordered pairs, so I'm going to show you how we're going to find G inverse when we have G expressed as a set of ordered pairs. So I've opened up MathType, which is a program that allows us to write mathematical symbols. It looks rather nice. And I have here the function g. And we have here the the ordered pairs, negative 3, 3, 1, 2, 2, 7, 3, negative 3, and 7, 0 that I mentioned before. Well, in order to find g inverse, we're going to just interchange the x and y values of the ordered pairs. So I'm going to change this to g inverse. So this is MathType. And then I'm going to interchange the ordered pair. So the 3 that is in the y position here, this 3 will now become the x position. And the minus 3 will become the y. 1, 2 will become 2, 1. 2, 7 will become 7, 2. 3, negative 3 will become negative 3, 3. And 7, 0 will become 0, 7. And so I've saved that, and now we can see that G inverse is just the interchange of the x value of the y and the y value of the ordered pair for G. So you can see here we have negative 3, 3 becomes 3, negative 3. 1, 2 becomes 2, 1. 2, 7, 7, 2. 3, negative 3, negative 3, 3, and 7, 0, 0, 7. So when we have this function listed as a set of ordered pairs, to find the inverse is relatively easy. We just interchange the x and y. So now the problem asks us to find G inverse of negative 3. So what that means, when they ask you G inverse of negative 3, that's equivalent to saying, Donna, find x equal to negative 3. And here it is. G inverse says, give me that corresponding y value. So G inverse of negative 3 is this y value of 3. Now to find h of x, since it's not listed as a set of ordered pairs, the steps for finding this inverse is a little bit different. So let's write down the 3 steps for finding the inverse when you have the function expressed as an expression rather than a list of ordered pairs. So the first step is to let y equal g of x and then interchange x and y. Step 2 is to solve for y. And step 3, let y equal g inverse of x, because we've interchanged it now. So let's go ahead and do step 1. For our particular case, the function is h of x. So instead of letting y equal g of x, I'm going to let y equal h of x. I'm going to change this to h. And then I'm going to change this to h inverse because they ask us to compute h inverse. So our problem, h of x is given by the following. 8x plus 13. So let's do our first step. So our first step says let y equal h of x. So I'm going to take that h of x equal to 13. So we have h of x again equal to 8x plus 13. And so we're going to replace h with y. So we're going to have y equals 8x plus 13. So that's step 1. Then step 2 is to interchange the x and the y. So when I interchange the x and y, just like we did with the ordered pairs in the previous example, so now y is going to become x, and x is going to become y. Then the next step is to solve for y. So when we solve for y, that means to get y by itself. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of the constant term, positive added 13. So I'm going to subtract a 13 from both sides, and I'll have x minus 13 is equal to 8y. Now there's one more step that I need to do to solve for y, is to eliminate the 8. And since it's 8 times y, I'm going to divide both sides by 8 in order to cancel the 8. So I'm going to divide x minus 13 by 8. And then I'm going to divide 8y by 8. And when I divide 8y by 8, the 8's will cancel. And then I'm just left with y. And so now I have y equals x minus 13 all divided by 8. And that is my inverse function. So I'm going to replace y with g inverse. And so we have our function g inverse of x equal to x minus 13 all divided by 8. Excuse me, h inverse equals x minus 13 all divided by 8. Oops. So let me go back there and fix that in my equation. Yeah, so this would be h. Sorry, I apologize. All right, now let's do the third problem. And our third problem says compute h composed with h inverse of 5. It turns out when you take h composed with h inverse of 5, that really is saying first compute h inverse of 5, see what number you get, and then evaluate that value for h. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to take this 5 and I'm going to plug it in for x. So I'm going to get 5 minus 13, which is negative 8. And negative 8 over positive 8 is negative 1. So I'm going to have negative 1 when I do the first evaluation. So I'm doing h inverse of 5, which means to take 5 and replace everywhere you see an x with 5. So 5 minus 13 is negative 8, divided by 8 is negative 1. So h inverse evaluated at 5 is negative 1. Then it says now compute h of negative 1. So let's capture that using our math type. So now I've written it out in math type. So our first part was h composed with h inverse of 5. Really means to first evaluate h inverse for 5, at 5. And when I plug in 5 for h inverse, I got 5 minus 13 over 8, which was negative 1. Now I'm going to evaluate h of negative 1. And then let's go back and look at what h was. H was given by the expression 8x plus 13. So now I'm going to do 8. Instead of x now, I'm going to evaluate it at negative 1 plus 13. And so when I take 8 times negative 1, order of operations says to multiply first. Let me move this up so you can see. So I have 8 times negative 1, and that's going to give me negative 8, plus 13 gives me 5. And so you can see that the number that we started with, the number that we ended with is the same as the number that we started with. So if it's truly an inverse, if your inverse is correct, that should always be the case. They cancel each other out, so to speak. Same as with the square root function and squaring, cube root function and cubing, and the logarithmic function and the exponential function. They cancel each other out. So I hope this video was helpful, and these are the steps for evaluating a problem on solving for inverses.